I guess it was working before.
Yeah?
I guess so.
Can you hear me okay?
All right. I can hear you perfect. We have one person who just jumped in. We're going to wait a couple more minutes until the rest of us roll in. Please, in the meantime, share your name, where you're logging in from, and what you're looking to get out of today's session. I'll start. Justin, can you see my shared screen, the slideshow?
No.
Okay.
Just your video in my chat.
Okay. All right. Right now, we still only have one. Please. Oh, hi, Jenny. Perfect. Okay. While, again, we just wait a couple more minutes, it's going to be a small, intimate group, which is awesome. So, Jenny, you're going to be able to ask a lot of questions, which we're super excited about. And thank you for showing up. I know it's the middle of the day. There is a way for you to turn on your camera and or microphone, but we're going to bring you up to do that. So you would have to press the speak button on the bottom with the hands up and we can bring you in, or we could just click on you at the given time. But first, we're going to just wait a couple more minutes to just see who else is logging on before we bring you up to speak. Jenny, can you share so Benjamin's in college, can you share what year he is in the chat and what specifically you're looking to get out of it? Got it. Okay, perfect. All righty. So I am just going to pull up the slides because for whatever reason, my screen is not sharing. I'm going to try a different way. And just give me one moment. Okay, Justin, while I'm pulling up the slides, why don't you share who you are,
Okay.
what you do, and your role in the company?
Of course. So, hi, I'm Justin. I'm an ADHD coach working with Brooke. I have actually been working with Brooke, I think, the longest of the coaches on the team. And I work primarily with middle, high school, and college age students, boys and girls. I do work with adults as well, but my focus does tend to be on teens and young adults. And my passion with working with the company is I've been that college student who had those accommodations and the support in high school. And then when you get to college, it's not quite as readily available as it was in high school. And that drove me to try to show others like, hey, there's actually stuff out there that can help you. It's just you actually have to put a little bit of work in. And so I try to coach students into realizing what their environment is and how to navigate through it with the challenges they face, because everyone with ADHD is a little different.
Okay, awesome. So we have a few more people who've just jumped on. So if you have just entered in, please feel free to just introduce yourself, who you are, where you're signing in from, and what you're looking to get out of the session in the chat. All right. So today, Justin's going to be talking about getting the accommodations that you specifically deserve or your student and child deserves. And if you stay until the end, there will be a free gift. So for those of you, it's going to be action-packed, lots of information on today's session. It is a small group, so you will be able to get heard, ask as many questions as you want in the chat. If we do have time at the end, I'll bring you up and you'll be able to speak and ask your questions. All right. So Justin.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Justin. I will be going over how to acquire accommodations in college. The subjects we're going to be discussing today broadly are going to be how do I ensure, well, first actually is when and where to start. We all need to know when and where to start. And then it's how do I ensure the accommodations are respected by my college and professor. And then after that, it's the most requested accommodations for ADHD and also learning disabilities, because a lot of times they can overlap between ADHD and learning disabilities. Some they only give to one or the other. It really depends on your school, and we'll get into that as well. And then also we're going to discuss other accommodations that can be associated with other disorders that are common with ADHD, such as anxiety and depression, because a lot of times the accommodations you can acquire from those conditions actually can help with ADHD as well. And then lastly will be, well, what happens if I've done all the right things, I've given it my all, and I still haven't succeeded? It's where to go from there and what your options are. And then we will do a question section. So we're going to do when and where to start. So the answer to that question is always going to be as early as possible. And what do I mean by that? It's let's do your research. So you want to look into, okay, what are my accommodations now? And if you do not have accommodations and you feel like you might need them, get tested before you go off to college. That way you have an idea of what accommodations to ask for, because through that testing, you'll be able to identify what you're struggling with. So the first thing the school is going to ask you if you are applying or even looking at the school is, do you currently have accommodations in school? And if you do, they're going to say, well, what are those accommodations? And then you want to ask, here's what the accommodations were, but here's what I requested, because you might request certain accommodations and they might not always get approved by the school, and they'll have different reasons for that. And I'm talking right now about high school, because colleges like to look back on what accommodations you've received throughout K through 12. And so there could be accommodations that the high school was not willing to grant you, because a high school setting is completely different than a college setting. A college might actually grant you that accommodations. So you want to look at both, like what you requested and what you currently have, just to have that record. So also keep in mind, though, you might have accommodations that have been granted to a student, but they might not use them. They might not need them. A good example of this that I've come across a lot in even my coaching and just personal experience is I always had extended time on every test I ever took, but more often than not, I didn't need it. There were times that I needed it, but I was like, I don't know if I really need to keep that. Well, when you're looking at college, just try to keep in mind it is completely different than a high school setting. So you might need accommodations that you're not currently using that are granted to you. So just because your student might not need, let's say, notes given to him ahead of time in class, he's able to keep up because his high school class is 40 to 45 minutes. In college, it could be an hour or 2 hours. So that's a long time for somebody with ADHD to try to focus on taking notes and listening to auditory sounds and absorbing that as well. So they might actually need to use that accommodation of, I need my notes ahead of time so I can actually listen to what's being said and not so hyper-focused on what's on the board. That's something you want to keep in mind when doing your research. You also want to make sure that you definitely look into their phrasing when it comes to how often they're going to help you when it comes to disabilities. So what I mean by that is on every college website, there should and usually will be a tab disability services. If you notice the language or there's a ton of forms and like hoops you have to jump through to get anything, even if it's a basic accommodation, that means that you're probably going to get some pushback in every aspect. If you notice that it's just, hey, have documentation, show that you've had these accommodations in the past. If not, you've gotten testing, you're good to go. That means they're going to work with you really well. That's just something you want to keep in mind when deciding between schools. If though you want to even start earlier, because the whole topic is where to start, it comes to ACT and SAT accommodation, as well as the LSAT. I will start off with the LSAT. They do not give accommodations unless it is basically for a physical disability, as in you need somebody to be able to read out loud a question to you. Other than that, there's not much, and they even state we do not give accommodations because if you're unable to fulfill these duties in this timely manner, you wouldn't pass basically the bar that they require. So I believe if you can prove that you are sufficiently able to do your job, if you have dyslexia, they will give you extended time and allow somebody to read out the questions to you, and you just have to answer them. But other than that, they will not do any accommodations, no extended time, nothing. For the ACT and SAT, they will give you accommodations very similar to what your student has in high school. The caveat to that, though, is they have to have accommodations currently while they are in high school. If they do not have them, and even if you're getting your student tested, a lot of times they will not grant them because they have not had them to learn the material that will be covered over their test. Even if your student has accommodations in high school, though, a lot of states require it to have had psychoeducational testing done within the last 2 years. It used to be 5 years, but in like 2018, I believe they changed it to the last 2 years. So if you are looking for accommodations and your student or yourself does have accommodations currently in high school and you've not had psychoeducational testing done in the last 2 years, that would be a good time to start looking at your laws in the state because it does differ. They do set a standard, but some states have requirements they have to follow. It usually is 2 years. So if you've not had it done in 2 years, just double check that. If you have, you're most likely good unless they update their law because they do change. So you want to look into what the current requirements are and also know what previous testing you have had done and when you've had it done. And another thing to do when trying to figure out where to start, if you have several colleges that you've looked into and now you're ready to start touring. So let's say you go to several tours. Well, any parent or student who's been on a tour, you'll know that there is an opportunity for the student to explore campus. A lot of times they allow the parent to do their own thing. This is a good time for either the student to explore on their own, or if the student wants to learn about other aspects of campus and the parents want to know what they're going to be working with, stop by the Disability Services Center and get some more information. Speak to the people there. See how welcoming they are, how friendly they are to work with you, and how helpful they are at giving you information on what to look for. Because a lot of times that's a good indicator on how well the school is willing to work with you once you're already a student. So if you're not a student yet and you go in there asking for information and they kind of like, oh, well, you have to do this, 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 and you're not getting much from them, well, you haven't even paid them yet to be a student there, and that's the way you're being treated. They're probably not going to treat you as a student too much differently. And a lot of times that does happen. It's just that they can be overwhelmed because sometimes the student department is not that large. That's another thing to take into account. Are there enough resources in the disability services for those students in ratio to the amount of students that the college has? If they seem overwhelmed and like they don't have time for you, that means that when your student might have an issue and they need to take it up with those people, they also are still going to be overwhelmed and might not have as much time, and there could be delays. So that's something you want to keep in mind. So while you're on that tour, yes, it's nice to see their rec area and their dorms and all that, campus and all that, but look at the facility that your student will be dealing with a lot to ensure that they can succeed and see how they are doing. And the best way to do that is just in person and just going in there, seeing how helpful they are and asking questions while you're there. And sometimes you can even make an appointment during the tour. Some colleges do offer that. Another way, let's say you don't have to stop at every disability services center while you're on these college tours, is if you're deciding between several colleges, go on their website and see what information they provide. And also what you can do is a lot of times, like, click as if you are already a student and are trying to get an accommodation. Click and see what their requirements are. Do they make you jump through several hoops? Or is it just show that you've been treated, this is what you have, and then you get those accommodations? Because some schools are like, just show us you've been treated, you've been medicated, and when you were. Then you get those accommodations plus your testing, the psychoeducational testing. Other ones are like, we need to know every time you go, what medications you're on, how you're doing, and it can be kind of personal. So doing your research on those websites can actually give you a really big insight on what your student might face in the future and also how willing the college is going to work with you. Colleges do have to respect the Disabilities Act. However, they can pick and choose how strict they want to be on the hoops they make you go through. Some will let you just say, hey, give us a note from a doctor that you've been treated and that we need you to help us. And others are like, well, this is what's required of us to give you these accommodations, so we're going to make you do A, B, C, D, and E before we even have that discussion. And that's okay, especially if it is a school you want to go to. But it does help to then know the hoops you have to jump through ahead of time so you can be prepared. Because you don't want to get into a situation where you have to get those accommodations and then you find out about those hoops to jump through, because hoops take time. And a lot of times when you're in that situation, time is not your friend. There's an exam several weeks away, or you're having issues right now with the teacher. You don't have 3 weeks to wait. So just knowing what you have to do ahead of time can really speed things up. You're not waiting for that back and forth. If a student currently has a 504 plan or an IEP in high school, so not in college right now, high school, another thing that you can do that would be really beneficial, if you're the student, have the conversation if you have an IEP teacher, or if you're the parent, same, or your counselor if you have a 504 plan, and find out what their feedback is and what they feel you should try to get as an accommodation that you might not currently have in the future, or one that you do have, and see if they can give you a letter of recommendation to provide as reasoning in case you do get any pushback. Because having a letter, or even just a letter of recommendation from somebody who's worked with you closely, who knows you well, has followed your IPE or 504, can give a different perspective on why you need it, and sometimes that can actually push through getting those accommodations easier. And even if you're somebody who's no longer in high school but you had one, a lot of times if you reach out to your IEP teacher, they will gladly do that for you, and there's usually not a cost for it unless the school requires them a cost for releasing any type of paperwork. Brooke, should I continue on going, or should I answer questions?
Yeah, why don't you answer some questions?
Okay. Let's see.
So Jenny, I know you had some questions. Why don't you share them in the chat, unless we're going to be going over it in our future slides.
I'm raising specifically what I
Okay. right, Justin, why don't you continue until a question comes through?
Okay. So the next section is, how do I ensure the accommodations are respected by my college and or professor? So after getting approval for your services, what you want to do is you want to request documentation that you can provide to the professor. And you want to have this in two forms. And I say this because a lot of times you're going to get respondent from the disability services once you get the approval and email. You might get it in mail. If you do, what you need to do is then scan it and save it as a document. And if you get it as an email, save it as a document and print it. And I say that because beforehand, what you want to do is email each professor that you have ahead of time before you even start your class, and introduce yourself, let them know that you have accommodations, you have gone through disability services, you have the approval, and attach the letter of approval with the accommodations and send it to your professor so they have a heads up. Now, for each class, it is a good idea to have a paper backup, because you might go to that first day and let's say they made a last minute schedule change and the professor changed, or you're not actually dealing with the professor directly. You deal more with the TA who didn't get that communication from the professor and they're not respecting your accommodations. It's good to have that paper backup of, hey, here's my letter, just to show you. And they will be willing to work with you as long as you can show that you've gotten the approval, you've taken the step to notify the professor, and you now have documentation you can give them right then and there. There will not be much pushback. Where you might get some pushback, though, is if you did not take those steps and all of a sudden you start struggling in that class and you're like, oh, well, actually, I have these accommodations. I should get extra time on my assignment, or all of a sudden I need notes ahead of time, or I want a quiet room. And you've not asked for that for the first half of the semester, they're going to say, no, you didn't tell us that. And then you can show them that documentation and they can look at it, but you could get pushback in the fact that you didn't tell them ahead of time. I have seen that happen where a professor has told someone, from assignments from here on out, I will respect these accommodations, but since I was unaware of it, the assignment that is at hand here doesn't count for that because I was unaware of it when that was assigned to you. Therefore, the requirement of when it was assigned to you still stands. That can happen if you've not told the professor and alerted them of your requirements. And this is on the student to do. It's not on the professor. It's not on the parents. It is on the student to take that step to inform them that they get these accommodations. And that is a big adjustment for students, especially if they were diagnosed with ADHD or learning disability early on in life, because that means they've had parents and teachers in the school system notifying the next person who's going to be looking after them for them their entire school career. So having to take that on is a new task on top of having to adjust to being out on your own in college. But unfortunately, parents, they're not going to care if you call them and say, my student felt anxious or didn't know how to bring it up. Therefore, they didn't ask for those accommodations. I usually take care of that. The school will not care. Your student does have to do it on their own. So the best way to do it, and something parents can help their student with before they even go off, is to make sure you have those accommodations and the approval from the disability services, and know that you have sent an email to each and every one of their professors.
Justin, we got a question in that says, what are some of the most typical accommodations that colleges offer?
That is later on in the presentation.
Okay, perfect.
Was there any other question that I should answer at this time?
Nope.
Okay. Actually, funny you say that. We're here getting to that part of the presentation now, because I actually talked through some of the slides. Sorry. A lot of it was making sure you have the proper documentation to get those accommodations. I talked about psychoeducational testing. I do want to talk a little bit before I do get to what the accommodations are, the benefits of psychoeducational testing, even if you don't need to get it done as required by the school. So let's say your school doesn't need it for 5 years and you've had it 4.5 years ago, you're good. It does help though to have the psychoeducational testing done before college, because our brains are still growing, especially at a younger age when you're in that 16, 17, 18, 19 age range. It's really growing, and having yourself retested at 17 or 18 is completely different than if you were 15 or 16, just in maturity level and distraction level. So you actually might be able to identify more what you're struggling with now as opposed to what you struggled with when you were 15 or 16, because ADHD can change a little bit. You might be more hyperactive when you're younger and then switch more to inattentive, or you could be more inattentive and then have more hyperactivity. It does change with age a little bit, and then you kind of level out once your brain is fully matured. So it does help to have that psychoeducational testing if you want to be the most prepared you can within a year before college. But it can be costly, so I understand why you would want to hold off on that. Just a suggestion if you wanted to be extra prepared. So the accommodations that colleges will offer and the most requested are about the same. They will honor most accommodations that even high schools, middle schools, every other school will accommodate. However, they can be a little more strict in what documentation they will need proof of. So kind of going to high school, they might just need a letter from a psychiatrist or a pediatrician that they have this ADHD diagnosis and that these are the accommodations they should receive. A college might require more. How often do they come see you? What medications are they on? Are they making improvements? Why do they need these accommodations? What aspect of the disorder requires them to have those accommodations? So they will still respect them. They just require more information. The main accommodations that they will give you and that are requested are extended time or time and a half. And I say it that way because it can be usually called both, but it's more often than not, it's time and a half. You get the amount of time it takes you to take the test and then half of the time to finish it. So if it's an hour test, you get an extra 30 minutes. You can get double time. That one they don't give as easily, but it's not usually as needed either. Exams and tests in a quiet room. That is one of the most requested, and it's pretty easy to get if you have the proper documentation. A word bank for tests. That's more for learning disability as opposed to ADHD. If you have a learning disability and can show that you have a problem recalling words without a word bank, but can answer the questions if a word bank is provided without any help of where those words go, you can get that easily. But that's not so much for ADHD, that is more for a learning disability. Having questions read aloud is another accommodation. That is more for learning disability or dyslexia. It can be for ADHD, but they usually require one of the others for it to be needed. But most people with just ADHD don't need that accommodation. They would have dyslexia or learning disability. Priority seating in class. That can be for ADHD, and that's not too hard to get as an accommodation because it's easy to prove that you need the focus, and the best way for you to focus is to be up front and center where the teacher can look at you. They will keep you focused. Priority scheduling for classes. So that one, it really depends on how well your school will work with you. But it is something that can be done. It's not super hard unless it's a very, very, very competitive area like medical school or something like that. They usually will work with you. And what priority scheduling for classes is it lets your student, let's say they're a freshman, the way it works is seniors, juniors, sophomores, and then freshmen get to pick classes. So for a lot of freshman classes, it's not a huge deal because only freshmen have to take them, but there are classes that, are competitive. So it does help to get those classes, but it's actually more useful in the time of day. So if you know that your student struggles with ADHD and they have a really hard time waking up in the morning, or they can't fall asleep until 2 a.m., even if you worked on their routine, a lot of times freshmen or even sophomores can get stuck with that 8 a.m. class. And then they end up not being able to get to the 8 a.m. class, and therefore they fail based on their attendance, not necessarily the material itself. So where priority scheduling can really come into play is you can make a schedule that best fits where your focus is. So you might know that you're most productive from 10 a.m. to like 2 p.m., and then you need a little break, and then you're good in the evening from like 4 to 7. You can pick those classes that are available at that time before even the seniors can. And you can make a schedule that is conducive for the best way for you to get through the day and stay focused through those classes, and keeping in mind what your homework load will be. So a lot of times priority scheduling can be overlooked, but it's I think one of the most important tools you can use for getting your students set up for success, because they usually know when they're most productive and when that they're going to work. And I also want to point out that don't fall into an ideal. Don't say like, oh, every day you're going to wake up at 9:30 a.m. and you'll be there by 10. If you know that they typically sleep if they're supposed to be up at 9:30, they sleep until 10, pick the 11 class. So be realistic on what actually your student is functioning like, or if you're the student themselves, what you function like. And if you have this accommodation, schedule on what you know yourself or you know them to be the most productive at.
That's huge, Justin. I remember when I went to college and I had an 8:30 swim class Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I can't tell you how many times I skipped that class because I just couldn't make it up. And at the time, I didn't know I had ADHD. So that's huge, priority scheduling. We do have a question. Would now be an okay time to ask it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so a question from Karen. If you were recently diagnosed in the middle of the semester and are navigating the accommodations as soon as possible, then how do you find the right support besides administration?
If you are diagnosed mid-semester, what you need to do is talk to the person who diagnosed you and see if they feel you could get accommodations. I'm not sure if the person who diagnosed you is a psychiatrist, psychologist, or a psychoeducational tester. If it was a psychiatrist, psychologist, I would ask them if they feel you need psychoeducational testing, but also ask them to write you a letter if they feel you could get accommodations to your school. They'll ask you to sign a release of information, so the school might request records. You can limit what records they're able to see, and that could just be visits. But they'll write a letter. You can turn it into your disability services. If they say that's not enough from the letter from the person who diagnosed you, then just ask them what the requirements are. And then you can get those requirements and reach out to the person who diagnosed you and see if they can give you a pathway forward to achieve those requirements to get that accommodation. And a lot of times they actually have people they work with, and they can streamline things for you as well.
Great. Thank you.
Is there any other questions?
Not at the time.
Okay. So moving on with accommodations that are mostly required for ADHD and LD, and also that are given by colleges. Guaranteed free tutoring for all classes. So something that's not known that much is a lot of colleges provide for every single subject. If you do have disabilities to the service center, is you get student tutoring for each class. And I think it's usually 3 to 5 times a week for an hour. And it's a grad student or a senior undergrad student that will do tutoring in the class that you're needing help with. And it's guaranteed in a quiet room. It's scheduled and it's free. And you can even use that if you want, just to have a body double, You might not need tutoring, but you might just need somebody who, make sure you're there doing your work, who actually keeps you on track. You might say, oh, I can body double with my friend, and then you end up talking half the time. But if you want to just use that tutoring service, they're there to tutor you, or they can just be there to make sure you're doing things correctly. It could be used in a multitude of ways. Another thing, this one is hard to get, but with technology, it's not as much needed per se as it was in the past, which is notes provided ahead of time or a recording device for lectures. A lot of universities now, they use slides and they have an online portal and they upload their lectures and the notes and everything there. So you might not need it. Where this can come in handy, though, is if you have, let's say, an older professor or a professor who might not stick so much to the slides, to get a recording device to record the lecture of what was said in class, especially if the material they test you on is also what they verbally say out loud and not just what is on the slides. That is when you really want to fight for this. But if you want to have the notes ahead of time printed out, they'll most likely give them to you because it's not so much a big deal anymore. This is more for when Brooke and I were in college back in the day and they used blackboards.
We have another question from Karen. Has there ever been a time where a service animal is needed for accommodations? Have you heard of that?
I have, and that actually does come up, but not for ADHD.
Okay.
I can answer that now. They will grant you a service animal if you have proper documentation from a psychiatrist stating why you need it. But they will not grant it for ADHD. It needs to be something more like bipolar, anxiety, depression, where it needs to mentally provide a service that it can do. Now, what I took that as when you said service animal was emotional support.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what emotional support and service are different. Service is more for a medical condition. So that's like there's service dogs that can detect irregular heartbeats and they'll like lay on you so you know to call 911 before you have a heart attack. That's completely different. Those are always respected. But emotional support dogs or animals, any type of animal, you're not really going to get from a college for ADHD, not even learning disability.
Thank you, Justin.
This one is the last accommodation for ADHD learning disability. This one is very, very rare. It can be done, but it has to be an extreme circumstance, and that is a reduced homework load. It's not uncommon to have that in middle school and high school, even elementary school. But in college, it's rare because of the way the college setting is structured. For every hour you spend in class, you spend about 2 hours per hour of studying. So a lot of the learning you're doing is outside of the classroom. And so for them to reduce that work means you're not going to be adequately prepared for the test. And accommodations are not really set up so you don't have to be tested on the same material as everyone else. It just gives you the benefit and the time and the structure you need to succeed as well as everyone else. So to get a reduced homework load, you're asking honestly to not have to be tested on as much material. And then that also kind of sets you up for failure for the following class because it builds. So colleges really will push back, but in some extreme circumstances, they will do a reduced homework load. A lot of times, though, it plays out into you're going to have to extend it. So you might not have to be tested on this material now, but you're going to have to take like a 3-week test over the summer, something like that, because they want to make sure you do pass the same thing as everyone else. But it can be done. Not so much recommended. Typically what they will tell you to do is drop a class, reduce your workload. So if you're taking 12 credit hours and you feel like you need to have a reduced homework load, they're going to say drop one of them and just focus on the 2 or 3 classes, and you can just take an extra year. That's the answer you're going to get usually on that. With ADHD, there are other very common disorders that go along with it. It's not for everyone. Some, like it kind of like with learning disability, a lot of people with ADHD also have learning disability, but not everyone has a learning disability also has ADHD and vice versa. Two of the biggest common ones are depression and anxiety. And sometimes that can stem from having undiagnosed ADHD for a long time and not knowing that you're anxious or depressed because you might say things out loud that hurt people's feelings or whatnot. And the other could be maybe you're anxious and depressed because you don't realize you have ADHD. Either way, they tend to go hand in hand quite often. I don't want to say more often than not, but quite often. And colleges give different accommodations for ADHD or for anxiety and depression than they do for ADHD. However, some of the accommodations for those actually can really help ADHD. That being said, to get accommodations, you do usually have to give them more personal, detailed documentation to get accommodations. And by that, they might request psychiatric notes. So if you've gone to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or diagnosed and say, I want the full evaluation and any follow-up, they might want the full notes. They might request what medications you're taking, how you're doing, how often you have to go. If you're willing to provide that information, and I understand it is very sensitive, you can get some really helpful accommodations though. And some of those are, which we discussed, a service animal, emotional support animal. That actually can calm you down, which is ADHD, anxiety, depression. It makes you feel better. Another one is a quiet room, your own dorm room. So instead of having a roommate, you would get a single room. You would still be in the dorm, but that removes that distraction of I can't study at home because I have a roommate who does their own thing. And therefore, you have your personal space you can go back to, your orderly routine. You can even have your own study area that's separate from your relaxation area. And you can still be in the dorm, so you're in a social environment, which is perfect for ADHD. You can be social, do your own thing, and you have your own space to go to. And if you do suffer from depression or anxiety, you have a safe place to go where you know that you can just relax there and that's your space. And a lot
Justin, I just want to be mindful. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to be mindful of this ending in 15 minutes.
Okay. I'm actually, I think, almost to the end. I just have to get to what we do. Oh, sorry. One other thing for the last accommodations would be you can also ask for noise canceling headphones if you have anxiety. They do provide those on top of the quiet room. The last is, what do we do if your student has tried all these things and they're still not doing well? So,
real quick, Justin, we do have one more question. If you suffer from anxiety due to your ADHD, should you request accommodations based on your ADHD or anxiety?
Both. You want to do both. And that, again, is where you have the letter or the documentation to show how your ADHD is affecting certain things and your anxiety is affecting certain things. And they're not mutually exclusive. You can have both, and you need both accommodations. And they might even be able to say, because you have both, it actually worsens certain things, and you're more likely to get accommodations. One of the harder ones to get.
Great, thank you.
So what to do if your student does not do well in their classes after trying all of these things? So the first thing to do when you pick your college, do your research, know their policies. Go in knowing that you're probably going to do well and things are going to be fine, but you always want that backup plan. So what if it doesn't go well and doesn't go fine? Know what their requirements are, know their policies. For example, let's say you can't decide between some classes and that you want to take. There's so many classes, you have that priority scheduling, the world's your oyster. Well, know how long you have to drop classes after you sign up for them. Maybe it's better for you to try to see if you like the teacher, if you like what they say on syllabus day of the material they're going to go over. And if you don't, you can drop them. Or pick your perfect schedule out. And if you realize, all right, I'm going to give this a week try, see if I can handle this schedule, and you realize you can't handle it, you can drop the class, but you need to know when that date is. So know the policies of the school on when you can try things out and when to drop the class, and it doesn't affect your GPA. Yes, a lot of times you also get back your full refund, but also know when the full refund is, but also know when it starts to affect your GPA, because it's hard to get your GPA back up after it goes down. And if, let's say, something has come up, which life happens, we all just lived through a pandemic, we need to withdraw from college. That you realize you just can't do it right now, this isn't the right time, whether it be you thought you could personally and it's just too much of a struggle, you need to find out what the requirements are for what is called a medical withdrawal. And what that is, it's a medical reason that you had to withdraw from college. And it does apply to ADHD, anxiety, depression, learning disability, all of those disorders, but they do require heavy documentation and what you're doing to fix it now. So they might say, how many visits did you go see this doctor for during this time that you were taking this class? What happened? How long is this going to go on for? And they will decide whether or not they approve it. Some colleges, and usually Ivy League, are super strict, where they're like, unless you were in a mental hospital, we're not going to approve it. But most are not like that, and they will work with you. It's just that they do require a lot of personal information, and you do need a doctor who is willing to actually put the time in, because they usually have deadlines. So they might say, once you start this process, you have to have this form turned in 2 weeks, and then this form turned in after that in 3 weeks. So you have to find both. It is hard to do, but you can do a medical withdrawal, and it does not affect your GPA. It kind of just erases that whole semester, and you start back to where you would have been the next semester you go back. You see. And if you do have to go down that route, a lot of times they're going to require you to take a break. And they might even say, all right, we'll grant you this withdrawal, but you need to go through this amount of counseling before we'll take you back on campus, sort of thing. So that is just something to keep in mind. It's a step you can take. It's a very personal step, and you do have to be open and share a lot of information you might not be comfortable with. So don't look at that as like, if it doesn't work out, I can just do a medical withdrawal and not have to give up my own personal information.
Awesome.
So this is the question part.
Okay, so we said if you stay until the end, you get a free gift. So we do have an ADHD manual for you or for your children that helps with app suggestions, organization suggestions. So figured we could put this in a nice manual for you, bite-sized, easy to digest. Click that link. Also, while I leave that link up, feel free to ask any more questions in the chat that you might have. Additionally, I'll also put this link in the chat for you. Any questions? So I know we got a lot of thank yous. We got that you gave a really good roadmap of next steps, Justin. It was a very informative session. We have 10 minutes. So if we have any questions, we're happy to answer right now. And once questions stop, we are going to sign off. But in the meantime, while we wait for questions, we want to thank all of you for coming. And Justin, you did an amazing job in sharing with everyone all of this information. You know, Justin has a lot of experience and background working with children with ADHD and also working for a psychiatrist office as well. So he's seen it firsthand. So if you have any further questions that maybe you can't think of right now, feel free to reach out to Brooke at coachingwithbrooke.com, and I can field the questions to Justin or myself. Or if you're interested in receiving coaching for executive function for your student, please feel free to reach out or look at our website. Great. I'm glad that Benjamin feels secure going back. Awesome. Justin, really good feedback. In the Q&A box, what is a good resource to learn about legal rights our universities state?
So,
do you mean legal rights for the state of the university? How are you going to answer that, Justin?
For state, well, there's federal and state. So states do have some different, loopholes they can do. But every disability service center should have it posted where it's visible to the person in their lobby with your rights, but also it should be listed on their websites.
Awesome. Okay. Wonderful. Anything else?
I will add to that, though, if you're worried, like, is it my state or my school giving me this pushback on this accommodation? An easy thing to do is just find another school in the same area, go to their disability service center and see if they're asking the same requirements. And that will tell you if it's the state or the school. If theirs are more lax than the school you're looking at, then it's the school.
Great. All right. Well, we want to thank all of you for taking out the time today. I know everyone's time is important. And Justin, again, thank you so much for giving your time up to help all of these amazing individuals who attended. And I know a lot of people will be watching the video as well. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at Brooke@coachingwithbrooke.com or our website, coachingwithbrooke.com. Thank you again and have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.